Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. I want to share a quick look at another fun kit available at Love from Lizi. This is the Wood Grain Bumper Pack, and it's just full of crafty goodies. It's mostly paper, and I love that it can be used for masculine or feminine cards or projects. Let me show you everything that is included. I'll start with the pattern paper. There are 22 papers and 11 different designs, so you get 2 sheets of each design. And most of them have a really pretty wood grain look to them. So there's like the darker wood, there's the real white wood. This has a really pale green to it. And this one's real lovely with the flowers on it. And these are all single-sided sheets. Kind of a different assortment of colors. I love the pinks on there. And this is a really pale blue. Just kind of a hint of red on that one. This is real pretty with like the wood being cut. And kind of a whole bunch of little tree stumps. There's a nice light blue on that design, and then just a little kind of a pale yellow and some kind of reddish on that. So it's 22 sheets of paper. And there are 8 sheets of vellum, and they come in 4 different designs. So again, you're going to get 2 of each one. So there's this one with a real pretty different color woods. And then this is similar to that pattern paper. And then another similar one, but this has the red and pink flowers instead of the blue. And then one final piece. That is lovely. And there are 2 different alphabet stickers. So there's these really tiny square letters. And then there's also all the uppercase. It's kind of a variety of the different wood tones. And there are a ton of these fun die cut punch outs. So there's 2 different box pages, so you get 2 of each one. And then along in the middle, kind of on the sides, there's a whole bunch of different sentiments that you could add, maybe decorate to your box or add them to a card. Got a nice variety, a little something for you, And then there are a whole bunch more of these fun die cut punch outs. So you have little envelopes, a lot of different sentiments. Some more of the little envelopes, or pockets I guess. You put a little sentiment in there. A bunch of journal cards, little banners, and more little tags. And these are all punch out borders. So these just pop out really easily. More sentiments and tags. There's some nice round ones. And then there's some bows that will all pop out and assemble together. Whole sheet of a bunch of little flag or banners. Actually, there's 2 sheets of those. And then some more little journal cards, little tags, little envelopes. So a whole bunch of fun things to add to your projects or cards. And then of course we have a sheet of peel-offs, and these are like a chocolate brown. And then finally there are 3 sheets of the foam squares. So that is everything that is included in the Wood Grain Bumper Pack. Okay, so let's get started on card number 1. I'm using Mojo Monday Sketch 361. This is a card sketch I've used quite a few times. It's kind of one of my favorites. So to save time, I did go ahead and cut out all of the papers according to the sketch measurements. And you may have noticed that background piece has a scallop circle cut out of it. I did do that just to save on paper, and I will be using that scallop circle later on this card. So for that thin piece that goes across the middle of the card, I'm using 3 of the peel-offs that come in the kit instead. I used 2 of the widest ones on the outside and then the middle width for the inside. And then I just cut the ends and tucked them behind. And since I do love adding layers to my cards, I did include several sheets of this dark brown cardstock. The sentiment is one of the die cut punch outs that's included in the kit, and then there is that scalloped brown circle, so I just matted that and then used some of the foam squares, and then I'm just going to adhere that card front onto a card base. And then just one of my little trademarks, I made a little banner and just put it in that upper right hand corner, and then I also cut a real thin strip of the pattern paper to line on the inside of the card. And then just for a finishing touch, I'm adding a few of this bottle green Nouveau drops. Just 2 of them around the sentiment and then 5 little tiny ones at the bottom. So that is card number 1. For card number 2, I'm using Operation Write Home sketch number 146. All of Operation Write Home sketches already include measurements. But for all the other sketches used in this video, I did figure out the measurements for A2 size cards. And you can always find those sketch measurements over on my coordinating blog post, and that link is in the description below. So for this card, the background paper has this really lovely gray and sort of light pink, sort of a rose color in the background. I think it's actually my favorite pattern paper in this whole pack. The sentiment is one of the die cuts that's included in the kit, and I did trim it down to size so it fit nicely on this card. And then I also added this real small piece of this blush pink color. It was just a scrap that I had and it coordinated really nicely with that background paper. With all the different wood grains that are included in this kit, there's some that are a little busier and some that are a little softer, so it's pretty easy to mix and match several of them together, especially if you add some cardstock to give it a little bit of contrast. So in this upper right hand corner, I'm just adding a few punched small circles, and then also just a thin piece of the pattern paper to line on the inside of the card. And then just a finishing touch, I'm using some glitter Nouveau drops and just sort of sprinkling them all around the heart and the sentiment and a little bit below the banner. And that is card number 2. For card number 3, I'm using sketch number 247 from My Favorite Things. For the background, I'm using a piece of this floral vellum. And vellum can be tricky to use since any of the adhesive you put on the back can usually be seen from the front. So I find it easier if I can just put a frame around it and then just add that adhesive around just where the frame is laying over that piece. I used one of the punch out banners that's included in the kit and then just trimmed off the top part of it just so it wasn't hanging off the edge of the card. And then I really liked this thank you banner that's included in the kit, but I went ahead and added a little bit of layer just so there was some contrast. And since it wasn't quite long enough to go across the width of the card, I cut out a flower die cut, and then I'm just going to put it on that left hand side to cover up that sentiment part that doesn't go to the edge of the card. And then for the middle of the flower and then also the leaves, I used some of the wood grain paper that comes in the kit for those. And I'm just using some liquid adhesive to adhere all of those down to the card, and then putting that card front onto a card base. And then just a finishing touch, I pulled out some more of that glitter Nouveau drop and just adding a few drops on the side of the sentiment and then one in the middle of the flower. And that is card number 3. For card number 4, I didn't use any card sketches. I really liked this large square journal card. It was a bit too wide for the card, so I just trimmed a little bit off of the sides. So then after I adhere that piece onto the card front, I do trim just a little bit of the matted layer off. And then I punched out one of the bow ties. These are really fun to use. So there's two pieces that coordinate together, or you can mix and match to have different patterns. So after you punch out all the little holes that are already pre-cut, then you just wrap the front of the bow around to the back, line up all those little holes together, and then you can just use a brad to adhere them together. And then I was just going to put some glue dots to adhere it to the card, but then I decided I wanted sort of the tails of the bow to pop up just a little bit. So I used just some small pieces of some foam dimension. And then before I do any more of the card assembly, I'm just going to put that card front onto a card base. And one thing that's really fun about this kit, it has all of these letter stickers, so you don't even have to use any stamp sets. So I like the variety of the different wood grains on the larger alphabet. So I'm just trying to choose some different patterns so there's a little bit of contrast between the letters. And then I felt like the card needed something in the upper corner, so I just used some of the brown cardstock and cut a long banner just to put up in that corner. And then just a finishing touch, I used some of the real thin peel-offs and just put a piece above and below the sentiment. So there's some dotted lines that are on that journal card, so it was real easy to make them nice and straight. And that is card number 4. For card number 5, I'm using a sketch from Simply Stampin' Challenge. For the background of the card, I'm using the same white wood grain paper as I used on the previous card. In this paper that looks like a bunch of stacked logs, it's actually one of the border punch-outs. And then instead of adding the matted layer, this time I used a few of the wider peel-offs to just put on the edge of that border. I like that so many of the pattern papers just have this real subtle hint of color. Like this one has the blue and some of them have pink and others have the green. So it really gives you a nice variety for either masculine or feminine cards. Now for the sentiment, this is another one of the die cut punch outs, and I wanted to add some contrast, so I just adhere that onto some of the brown cardstock and then just fussy cut a thin border around there. And for this circle element, I pulled out one of these really large brads that I've had in my craft room for years. I don't even know who made it, where I got it, but it's so nice to actually use up something that's been hanging out for a long time. But I felt like it just needed a little bit more, so I did use some of the pattern paper and then just die cut this stitch circle, and then I'm using some liquid glue to just adhere that over that brad. And then I used a small stitch circle die to cut these brown circles, and I debated about popping them up with some of the dimension and then changed my mind, so I'm just using some of the liquid adhesive to adhere those in place. And then for a finishing touch, I pulled out some of this clear bling, and I believe it came in the October Love from Lizi monthly kit. So I still had about half of a sheet of it left, so that would be perfect to add 5 of them underneath the sentiment. So that is card number 5. For card number 6, I'm using sketch 456 from Mojo Monday. The pattern paper for the background has all these different colors of wood, kind of like someone used a bunch of different shades of wood stain. And then for this main element of my card, I'm using another piece of the vellum, and I really like, it has more of a gray color. It's these logs that are all stacked again. So once again, I cut out a frame, and then I just want to put some adhesive just where the frame is. And since this one is really thin, I used some 1/8 of an inch score tape. And I don't want to lose some of the color of the vellum. It can kind of get lost if you put it on a dark paper. So I did line the back of it with just some white cardstock. And then I'm just putting some ATG on the back of that and then adhering that to that card front. And then I used one of the banner die cuts. It was a little bit wider, so I did trim it down just slightly. And then of course added some brown cardstock for some layering. Then I'll just adhere that card front onto the card base. And then for the sentiment, I'm using the other letter stickers. So there's uppercase and lowercase. And then I did decide to use all uppercase. And it's fun because it does have a lot of variety of different colors of the wood grains. So you can try to use the same colors or you can mix and match. And since I'm not very good at getting the stickers straight all the time, I just sort of did a little crooked pattern for them. And then I decided to pop it up a little, so I used some of the foam squares, but then I also used some of my regular foam adhesive just so it wasn't like crooked on the card. I wanted it an even look. And then just a finishing touch, I'm using some cream colored epoxy stickers. And of course that thin pattern paper just on the inside of the card. And that is card number 6. Now on to card number 7. So I had originally planned for this to be a really quick and simple card, and then of course it ended up taking much longer than I anticipated. I used a piece of this blue wood grain for the background, and then used a die cut and just cut out the word hugs. And then I adhered a piece of the vellum behind it. And I was careful to put the adhesive all around that word die cut, since I don't want that adhesive to show through. And then I'm just putting all of that onto some brown cardstock. Then I added some of the peel-offs to the bottom of the card, and I used all 3 of the different widths, starting with the largest first. So I'm just cutting the ends off and then tucking those behind. And of course we always save those little cut off pieces. You just never know when they'll come in handy. So then once I get all 3 of those adhered down, I'm going to go ahead and adhere that card front onto a card base. And then I'll just add that thin pattern paper to the inside of the card. And then I pulled out some brown epoxy stickers that I've had for a while and just put a few of them in the upper corner and the lower corner. And originally that was all I was going to do with the card, but I felt like the hugs wasn't really standing out enough, so I pulled out the glitter Nuvo drops and decided to just cover all of the letters with this so it adds some nice sparkle. And I did speed this part up quite a bit because this took a little while. And once it dried completely, I really liked that extra shine that it gave it. So that is card number 7. For card number 8, I'm using Mojo Monday sketch number 322. So again, I'm repeating the pattern paper in the background using that light blue wood grain. So I'm just going to add some white ribbon, and I'm using some score tape to adhere that down. And I was getting ready to actually put it in place, and then I realized I actually wanted the ribbon to go across the full width of the card. So I went ahead and adhered that piece down and then just used another piece of score tape and went all the way across this time. And then since I'm sort of going to tie a bow, I put a longer piece down first, and then I put the other piece across that. And then I'll hold those ends down in place with a piece of score tape. And then before I finish the bow, I'm going to focus on one of these little pockets. I used my bone folder to get a nice good crease, and then while I was adhering this together, I realized I attached one part that I shouldn't have, and so I did have to peel up some of the adhesive, and then I went back and just put a piece of score tape in there to make sure that I could get my little sentiment card in and out of that pocket. So now that I know where that pocket's going to lay on the card, I went ahead and finished my little bow. And I just tie a simple knot and then trim the ends of the ribbon. Not fancy, but I like how it looks. I put some ATG on the back of that pocket and adhered it to the card. And then I used this thank you sentiment, and I decided to trim some little banner tails on the ends of it, and I actually made it a little bit shorter as well. And then I still wanted to layer that with some brown cardstock just so it pops a little bit. And then I just used some of the foam squares so it would have a little more dimension on the card. But first I'll put that card front onto the card base. And yes, I do like to use a lot of adhesive on my cards. I want to make sure that they don't fall apart. So now I'm going to start working on this little journal card that's going to go inside of the pocket. So I used some of the pattern paper, and then this leaf die is from the October kit. I thought it looked so lovely in the variety of different wood colors. So then on the inside sentiment, I'm just adding some of those small stickers, and it just says so much. So then the full sentiment would be thank you so much. And then at the top of that little journal card, just punching some small holes and using a small piece of this brown and white twine. And I just kind of slip it through and make a little knot, and then I realized I did it backwards, so I always forget which direction to go in through first. And now that can slip right into the pocket. And that is card number 8. So now I'm on to card number 9. I'm using Sweet Sunday sketch number 225. And I actually used this same sketch for the November 10 card video. But I never actually followed the sketch very well. So I thought I'd try it again and see if I could actually stick to the sketch this time. I used just a small piece of pattern paper on the top of the card, and then for that lower part I just have some white pearlescent cardstock. And then some small pieces of this pink and gray wood grain. And then for the middle, for the sentiment, this is one of the tag die cuts that comes in the pack, but it was a little long, and so I actually cut it down into this rectangle piece so it would fit perfectly on the card. And of course I added the brown cardstock to layer all of those. And then I'm putting that whole piece onto another piece of cardstock just because I didn't want the white pearlescent to not have any contrast. We'll just put that onto a card base. Go ahead and add my little pattern paper on the inside. And then for the circle elements, I cut out some small little hearts out of the brown cardstock. And then I used some more of this bling, getting really close to using it all up. So I just used 3 of them below the sentiment. And it is self-adhesive, but I like to use some liquid glue just in case, because sometimes they still pop off. And then I wanted a little extra shine. So I just added some of the Nouveau Crystal Glaze to those hearts. And that is card number 9. So on to card number 10. I'm using a sketch from Operation Right Home. This is number 229. One thing I really love about this sketch is you can use a variety of different pattern papers all on one card. So I thought it'd be fun to mix and match some of these different wood grains. I used some of the banner punch outs as well as one of the envelopes just because there was more variety in the different wood grains. So I just used a circle die and cut out 5 different circles, and then the for you is one of the sentiments that's included. And then of course I added that matted circle, which I normally would cut out of the background, but I had a lot of extra cardstock scraps, so I just used what I had available. So as I'm adhering those down, I tried to mix up the different colors and different patterns. just so I had a nice variety on there. And then just a little extra detail on this card, I cut out this really small scalloped border. So I'm just using some liquid adhesive and just adhering that onto the side of the card. And then I'll put that card front onto a card base. And then I just added that little bit of pattern paper to the inside of the card. And then pulled out some more of those little gems and just put a few of them underneath the sentiment. And the little gem in the middle was not sticking, so this is one of the reasons I like to use some liquid adhesive. I just want to make sure that they don't fall off for the card recipient. So this is card number 10. So here is just a quick recap of all 10 cards I made using Love from Lizi's Wood Grain Bumper Pack. So this kit has so much paper, you could make cards for a long time. And the nice thing about the kit, you really don't need to use any stamp sets. I mean, I didn't use any for my 10 cards. There are so many different dies included that already have sentiments on there. It really is a lovely kit and I had so much fun using it. So I'll include a link to the kit in the description. If you enjoyed my video, please subscribe, and I really appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.